Welcome to Football's Golden Oldies from the Toll House Inn, Lancaster. Ian St John talks to a very special man. Ian leads the questioning of Real Madrid's famous president, Santiago Bernabeu, as he watches his team train before their epic European Cup final with Eintracht Frankfurt at Hampden Park in 1960. Bernabeu had played for Real against Motherwell in 1927. Kings of Spain, the unofficial 1927 Copa del Rey final. Only one foreign team in the world has won the Copa del Rey, the domestic cup of Spain. King Alfonso XIII of Spain donated a special version of the trophy, and Motherwell and Swansea faced each other for the right to face Real Madrid in the final. Motherwell won 4-3 in what was described by the King as a brilliant display of scientific football. On May 17, 1927, Motherwell, or the Steelmen, faced Real Madrid on their own turf and ran out 3-1 winners. It wouldn't be the only trophy Motherwell would win, as a trip to Barcelona a few days later produced a 2-2 draw with the Catalan side and a 1-0 win over Swansea again, so the club presented with the Barcelona Cup. Ian would eventually become the saint. When a religious placard was outside Anfield asking, "What will you do when the Lord returns?" the Scousers quickly answered, "Move St John to inside left." Ian St John is one of the most celebrated players in British football history, a central figure in the phenomenally successful Liverpool team of the 1960s, a star performer for Scotland, and later as one half of TV's favourite double act, Saint and Greavy. Bought from Motherwell in 1961, Ian was a key component in Shankly's side, but after 10 incredible years he was dropped from the team without warning and was greatly angered at the betrayal he felt from Shanks. Stood by a statue brings back memories. A statue that you see often can blend into the background in the landscape of your life. Strange then, that not so long ago Ian found himself standing alone behind the Kop at Anfield, gazing intently at the bronze image of Bill Shankly, the legendary figure who to Ian will always be flesh and blood, almost human, always human to a fault. Conflicting emotions always rise to the surface when Ian thinks of Shanks. Torn between love and hate, admiration and sometimes at least a little anger and disillusionment. The Liverpool of Shankly played with passion, creativity and tremendous panache, yet the team of Gerard Houllier that Ian had just watched amounted to the very antithesis of that. Ian looked at the terraces and the Kop. There was silence. It was as though Anfield was filled not with the most animated and humorous fans in football, but zombies. Childhood in Motherwell recalled by Ian. They put my father Alex on a stretcher, wrapped him in a red blanket and carried him down the stairway of the tenement. I was crying loudly while my mother Helen, surrounded by my brother and sisters, wept silently. Then they took him off in the ambulance and I never saw him again. I was 6 years old. Years later, one of my sisters produced a picture of him in his football gear, eyes bright and full of running. By the time I got to see him in those unknown colours, he had become a stranger. Just a distant guy on the stretcher, coughing, beaten, but I would never forget the blanket. Such a vivid splash of colour in the gloomy old building, and who knows That may have been the inspiration buried deep in my memory for my suggestion that my club Liverpool should adopt their famous All Red strip, that I argued with great conviction that it would have a tremendous impact. The death certificate said pleurisy and pneumonia, but his father was 36 and worn out from the steelworks and the poor diet, the freezing home and one too many cruel winters when he was taken away from his wife and 6 children. The day before he collapsed, Ian and his dad had gone to Fir Park to watch Motherwell, where they got sold, trying to shelter under some ramshackle steel erection, but the rain poured in. Ian thought, why did football take nearly 100 years and all those massive gate receipts before it considered building decent stadia? I don't heap all the blame on football for the loss of my father, but a few steel barons and a lot of malignant social engineering have to be thrown in. My father's death left me with a morbid fear that I might not live beyond the age of 36, and it never left me even when I was brimming with health on the football field. Sometimes I thought about the difficulties of life for my mother. The living room had a recess for a bed, a cold water sink, a cooker, and the door leading into another room, which had 2 beds and a wardrobe. And I grumbled when she sent me to the shop for cigarettes, Woodbines, Capstan or Craven Ale, many times with only enough money to buy 2 cigarettes, her only indulgence, her one little luxury. When he was 9, Ian entered the state of war with the O'Hanlon boys, Raymond, Left and Jimmy Wright, and he was terrified of them, virtually a prisoner in his own staircase at home. His mother said that the police were no use, so she would go to see the parish priest, Father Flynn, who said to her after hearing the story, "Everything will be fine, daughter. Leave it to me." That was it, all sorted, in a flash, by the power of the church, which has gone today. No one has it, not the church, the police, or anyone who tries to bring a little bit of order to the streets. Then suddenly the O'Hanlon family were no longer around. Maybe they went back to Ireland, but before they went, the middle O'Hanlon brother Joey, who was a useful fighter, took Ian to a boxing club. Ian was a very good boxer, but after one fight he came home with 2 black eyes, and his mother pleaded with him to turn to football. Ian still felt anger when he thought about the time he was taken to court by a big copper who caught him playing football in the street. And it wasn't as though Scott Street was a raging thoroughfare. Seeing a car was an event, as horses and carts for the milk and rag and bone men were more usual. The copper didn't care about that. He had Ian in court, standing in front of his mother for playing football in the street, some crime, when the magistrate looked over his spectacles and fined him, or rather his mother, 10 shillings. She would have to do a lot of cleaning to pay that, and even today Ian thought, "You bastards, what were you thinking about?" And when I looked at my mother's face, which said more eloquently than words, "Where am I going to get an extra 10 shillings? He looked at the copper who had given his evidence and wanted to say, "Couldn't you have just kicked me up the arse, you big useless bastard?" Hell and St. John's clan battled on together, but Tuesday, pension day, was the big day. The one day in the week when they were guaranteed a good breakfast, after one of his sisters went to the post office to collect the £5 pension and pick up bread rolls and butter on the way home. Ian's mother did a good job of feeding and dressing her children, as the family photos showed, but what they didn't show were the holes in their shoes. That was embarrassing. It told the world that you were really poor, and Ian never forgot the misery of having a hole in his shoe, as the kids with fathers generally didn't suffer from this affliction. A consolation of freezing winters was that the council issued free boots that had steel studs on the bottom and 3 holes punched in the side to identify them as council issue, so you couldn't take them to the pawn shop. Then the street lights came on again with the end of the war, and Ian used to find himself humming the song, "When the lights came on again all over the world." This wasn't the only new development. When he was 12, he came home one day to find his mother glowing. "We've got the radio in," she announced, pointing to a small box with knobs marked home and light screwed to the wall, and when it was switched on, Ian heard something thrilling. Commentary from Scotland playing Wales at Hampden Park. The radio brought an entire new world of excitement and terror. The Man in Black, Valentine Dyall, then Dick Barton, Special Agent. The Magic Box also made heroes of 2 West Indian cricketers, Sonny Ramadan and Alf Valentine, and Ian devoted a whole summer learning how to spin a cricket ball. When he played a celebrity match for London Weekend Television many years later in Dulwich, one of the opposition batsmen was Michael Gray, chairman of the BBC. Michael came to the wicket in his immaculate white and hoop cap, took guard before going to stroke Ian's first ball through the covers, but the ball moved beautifully and he was gone. Ian played cricket, was an accomplished boxer, and was gaining a reputation in the world of football, so what would he decide? Pat McCaw ran North Motherwell Football Club, and he became the pinnacle of Ian's life, a decisive, timely influence who taught him that a bit of talent was only a visiting card. When you first kicked a ball under Pat's gaze, you would find out if you had the temperament and the character for serious business, learning how to handle yourself under all sorts of provocation, and if you gave way to the first hint of pressure, you were a goner. Ian played with Pat's son in the Bridge Works team, but there was no training, with most of the lads being more interested in the pubs and dance halls than improving their game. Pat's son put in a word for Ian with his dad, who sent back the message, "Come over and train." One of his first games was for North Motherwell against Bridge Works, and the factory lads thought Ian was a traitor and tried to foul him at every opportunity. But Ian didn't retaliate, he simply got on with the game, and Pat said to him later, "Well done, son, you did the business today." Leaving school, he reported for duty at Taggart and Wilson Coachworks, where he would train as a fitter, but an accident when he drove a van in the works yard into a wall meant he was sacked immediately. His new job at Colville Steel Mill was heavier, but he was paid £4 a week. Having played for youth sides and works teams as a teenager, he worked in local industry and was learning to be a fitter, but in practice he acquired the skills of a world-class skier. He began his career at Motherwell, signing as a professional in 1957, after a spell with affiliated junior team Douglas Water Thistle as a provisional signing, but carried on a part-time engineering apprenticeship for 2 years, admitting he disliked it and actively avoided the work as much as possible. By the age of 18, Ian was established in the Motherwell First Team, but couldn't resist joining in a game in a local park. But next day, the foreman confronted him saying, "What was the score, you skiving little sod? And don't deny it because my son was playing against you." 6 apprentices were sacked one day for skiving, and it was only when a craggy little trade unionist called Willie Smith, who was far to the left of Joe Stalin, demanded their reinstatement, or everybody in the factory would go on strike, that his apprenticeship was saved, and they were all reinstated. By the age of 21, he qualified as a fitter, but was then called up by the army, and of course, he tried to get out of it by inventing a story about his injured wrist. The army doctors listened impassively, then announced, "You passed for the army, grade 1, and you can take John White's job." John White, who would so beautifully illuminate the world of football with his brilliant play for Tottenham Hotspur and Scotland, before being tragically struck down in 1964 by a flash of lightning. When St John got back to Fir Park, he told the manager about the disaster, who said he would ask a specialist to write a full report, so Ian was called to Glasgow for a recall medical before being told, "You're free to go." Pat McCourt made sense of the game and had so influenced Ian's career because he taught basic trends, as he did also for Gary McAllister and Joe Jordan. Joe came to him as a big ungainly lad, brave-hearted but raw, and in the briefest of times he signed for Morton and then Leeds United, Manchester United and Milan, played in 3 World Cups for Scotland, scoring uniquely in all of them. Manager of Motherwell was Bobby Ansell, who had brought together a group of talented young players, including Andy Weir, Willie Hunter, Pat Quinn and Sammy Reid, who were nicknamed the Ansell Babes. St John's debut was against Dumfries' side, Queen of the South, in an away fixture at Palmerston Park. Another landmark performance was when he scored a hat-trick for Motherwell in 150 seconds against Hibernian in 1959, one of the fastest recorded in Scottish football history. When he left Motherwell in 1961, after receiving offers from Newcastle United and Liverpool, Ian St John had a terrific record for Motherwell, scoring 105 goals in 144 appearances for the club in 3 major domestic competitions, over 7 goals in every 10 games. Ian's wife Betsy was still not 20 when English football came calling, but she said it was time to move on. Ian always thought that if she hadn't been at his side, he might have settled for being a star of Motherwell. The wedding taxi was shared with best man John McPhee and Betsy's best friend Anne Simpson. But the glamour dwindled when they all had to get out and push. Ian and Betsy had met in Bellshill, hometown of Hugh Gallagher, Alex James and Matt Busby, 2 miles north of Motherwell. Charlie Minton, manager of Newcastle United, turned up at Motherwell and clinched a deal to take St John to St James's Park for around 39,000, impressing on Ian that they were a First Division club. But next morning, Bill Shankly, borrowing a Rolls Royce from one of his directors, Sid Reeks, arrived at Fir Park and in typical Shankly fashion built up his club like European champions, not a club struggling in the 2nd Division. Of course, Shankly was helped in his task when the directors of Newcastle squashed the plans of Charlie Mick, leaving Bill Shankly to take Ian St John to Anfield for a record 37,500. Years later, after he retired, Bill Shankly said the acquisition of St John and later during the same summer Ron Yates as the turning point for their club, as they began their transformation into one of Europe's top footballing sides. Charlie Minton was a suave, impressive man, and when he knocked on the tenement door, he offered Ian £1,000, an illegal signing bonus, and this offer might have clinched the deal if Shankly hadn't to match it pound for pound. Like Minton, Shankly was a sharp dresser who got his ties from Germany, saying his father was a tailor there, always red, and Bill swept Ian and Betsy to Anfield, where they went into the boardroom for soup and sandwiches. Wholesome food in Shankly's eyes, where old Reuben Bennett was sat in a corner, nodding, smiling and smoking a cigarette. The following morning, Shankly took them to Shangri-La to view their house or the Liverpool suburb of Maghull, and there they found a budding Scottish enclave, Alex Young, Alex Parker and Sandy Brown of Everton, soon to be joined by the slaughterman from Aberdeen, Ron Yates. Shankly took the team to Wembley to watch Spurs play Leicester City in the 1961 FA Cup final, before going to the hotel with Ian where Leicester were dining. He yanked Frank McClintock out of the dining room and tried to tempt him to join Liverpool, but the flagrant tackle failed and Frank signed for Arsenal. He tried to do the same with Huddersfield fullback Bob McNabb, who called Shankly later with his negative decision, to be met with growls and contempt, no good wishes for the future, only Shankly saying, "Don't worry about it, laddie, I won't worry because you can't play." Motherwell Football Club had become my life, and they had 4 highly productive years out of me before selling me for $37,500 in 1961. Yet they didn't give me a penny. No one said, "Well done lad, you've been great for the club, so here's a few £100 as a parting gift." His wife Betsy insisted, "You are the centre forward of Scotland, you deserve more. In fact, you deserve £60 a week." The consequences of his move south was the old prejudice against Anglo-Scots, who throughout the 60s and 70s suffered with a lack of international caps, highlighted by the case of Dave Mackay, rated by Jimmy Greaves as the best player with whom he ever shared a dressing room, who acquired the grand total of 22 caps. He was selected for Scotland 21 times, and his international career began on May 6, 1959 in a 3-2 win over West Germany at Hampden Park, with the first of his 9 international goals scored against Poland in a 3-2 defeat in Glasgow on May 4, 1960. He scored twice in a 1962 World Cup qualification playoff match against Czechoslovakia in November 61, but Scotland lost 4-2 after extra time and didn't qualify for the World Cup finals. Ian's first game was against Everton in the final of the Liverpool Senior Cup in the spring of 1961, but the gate men wouldn't let him in because he had never heard of Ian St John playing for Liverpool. A little negotiation got him entry and he scored 3 goals in front of 70,000 fans. Everton won 4-3, but Shankly had thrown down the gauntlet that his team were destined for the First Division and would supplant Everton as Merseyside's top club. Over the years, Ian would see so many signs of Shankly's nature, his strength, crazy humour, sadness and passion, but behind the bluster, the exaggeration and the bizarre capacity to believe he was on the greatest mission in the world lay a superbly original football mind. Ian was there when he delivered his classic side-plitted team talk before a game with Manchester United, and this is it, just about word for word. Alex Stepney in goal, Christ, he couldn't catch a cold. Shea Brennan at right back, Now they say Matt Busby has a bad back. Not true, he has two bad backs. Then there's Nobby Starnes. I've got a gnome in my garden that's bigger than him, and he's blind as well. Bill Fawkes, I've never seen a juggernaut move quicker. You can score a hat-trick against him here. When three United players were left, representing Dennis Law, Bobby Charlton and George Best, Shankly's gaze swept around the room. He paused and then said, "Now boys, don't tell me you can't beat three men." Classical Shankly, what a man. Two great photographs. Ian signs for Liverpool in April '61, watched by Bill Shankly and chairman Mr. T.V. Williams. Scotland versus Northern Ireland at Hampden Park in 1962, with a team that was full of talented players. If you can't pass the ball, control it when it's passed to you, well, you can't play. That was Bill Shankly's opinion. It doesn't matter whether it comes to your chest, thigh, foot or anywhere else, you have to control it. Everything Shankly asked Liverpool to do came from his experience as a boy in Ayrshire and with Preston North End and Scotland, and later as a young manager at Carlisle, Workington, Grimsby and Huddersfield. Every skill was polished on the training field and in the gym, where they battered the ball against walls, played head tennis, and Shankly was the first to realise for the highest possible performance you had to take the players back to their roots, to a time when they most enjoyed playing the game. Ian St John much later said, "Nowadays it's often painful to watch a game through Shankly's eyes. You get the urge to get hold of the manager or coach and ask, have you grasped how many times you lost possession in the most unprofessional way?" Much of the work at set pieces and throw-ins at Liverpool during Gerard Hourier's time would have dismayed Shankly when he saw how many times the ball is surrendered at a throw-in. Many players seem to be lacking the very basic skills of football. Wembley, April 15th, 1961, was one of the bleakest days for Scottish football. Scotland did have some success in front of goal, scoring 3, but unfortunately England scored 9. The photograph shows Jimmy Greaves, who became Ian's partner in the Satan Greavesy show, torturing Scotland on his way to a hat-trick in the 9-3 win. St John was brought in to turn around Liverpool's luck, as they had been stuck in the second division for 7 years, narrowly missing out on promotion in 6 of those seasons. Liverpool returned to the first division in 1962, winning the league by 8 points over nearest challengers, Leyton Orient. Ian played 40 games, scoring 18 goals. Liverpool finished in a respectable 8th place in their first season back in the top flight, 62-63, and also reached the FA Cup semi-final. In 1963-64, though, they stunned the football world by winning the league championship, overturning a 17-point deficit to win the title by 4 points over Manchester United and 5 points over reigning champions Everton. St John played a major role in the title success by scoring 21 goals, the highest total in a season for the club. The photo shows Shankly at a Melwood training session with a few fans sat on the wall. But the tall player, 5th from the left, next to Ron Yates, was destined to be a superstar, and many of you will not recognise his name. I must confess I had never heard of him, but Dave Allison most certainly had, because Alf ended up at Bury. Alf Arrowsmith is second left on the front row. The photo shows Jerry Byrne, far right on the back row, a fearsome tackler who Shankly banned from tackling on Fridays before a game on the Saturday. The first title is gathered in by Shankly's team and the champagne flows. Ian St John said, "Shankly created more than a winning team. He instilled a spirit, a sense of how the game should be played, and in the process he dragged out feelings and perceptions that some players never realised they had, not until he set their blood flowing and gave them a glimpse of the stars." Alf Arrowsmith was described by Shankly as a born goal scorer. Alf was born in 1942 in Hollingworth, England, and arrived at Anfield as a fresh-faced 17-year-old in August 1960, having scored a massive 96 goals for the Derbyshire club Tintwistle Villa in the 59-60 season, a club record that has never been broken. He signed for Aston United, playing with Alan Ball, and scored 9 goals in 7 games when Liverpool made their move and signed him for £1,500. A year after his arrival, his name was on everybody's lips at Anfield, because the lad scored no less than 81 goals between 61 and 63 for the reserves. His breakthrough into the first team arrived in the latter part of the Championship 63-64 season, when he scored 19 goals in 24 games. Roger Hunt, Ian St John and Alf Arrowsmith scored a massive 67 league goals as Liverpool powered to their first league title for 17 years. The future looked bright for Alf, but then tragedy struck in the 64 Charity Shield that in fact inspired Liverpool's first recorded substitution, Phil Chilson. I never did find out what his injury was against West Ham after 15 minutes, but sadly it sounded very much like a cruciate knee injury. He missed most of the season and only made a further 13 starts plus 6 as a sub over the next 3 seasons before moving to Bury in 1968, then to Rochdale in 1970 and non-league Macclesfield in 72. Alf died in May 2005 and his 3 daughters said, after his family, there was only one love in his life. It was Liverpool Football Club until the day he died. This team, I feel, was built in the image of Bill Shankly. The ruggedness and fair play of Bill, alongside the skill that his great friend Tommy Finney showed every Saturday. They never achieved that skill, but that was the benchmark. Don't forget, Bill Shankly was a right arm who was never spoken to or booked by the referee in his whole career. All the Preston fans called him Tom, and after Stan Matthews was raised to the peerage, they called him Sir Tom. But Shanks was the only one who ever called him Tommy. The head of his life, as Johnny Giles looks on, Ian St John sends the ball past Paul Reaney on the line, watched by Roger Hunt. This goal won the FA Cup for the first time in the club's history. Less than 24 hours after cheering his team's European Cup victory over Milan, Jimmy McInnes, secretary of Liverpool Football Club, was found hanged in a turnstile booth at Anfield last night. Such was the intensity of his duties that he frequently resorted to spending nights in his office at Anfield, sleeping on a camp bed after 12-hour working days. Jimmy McInnes was struggling to cope with the excessive demands of his position. One evening shortly before the 65 Cup final, Bill Shankly entered Jimmy's office. The diminutive Scotsman was sat at his desk, surrounded by sacks filled with letters. The incessant drone of the telephone filled the air, and and his camp bed lay in the corner. Shankly could see how drained he was. Bill Shankly knew Jimmy McInnes could not have done any more than he had done for Liverpool Football Club. Still the most popular man at Anfield, Bill Shankly had said amid the ringing telephone. No, Jimmy McInnes replied, still the most unpopular man at Anfield. He was discovered by an inspector making a routine check near the Kop, and senior detectives spent 3 hours at the ground last night, and an inquest will be held today. While the police inquiries were going on, the club directors were called from their homes for a hurried meeting in the club boardroom. On Sunday, when he returned triumphantly with his team to Liverpool from Wembley after winning the FA Cup last Saturday, Jimmy McInnes was in jubilant mood. A colleague travelled with 53-year-old Jimmy for part of the journey, and Jimmy could only talk of the club's success and showed no signs of strain. All yesterday he was in his office organising Liverpool's journey to Milan next Monday in preparation for the game in the second leg against Milan on Wednesday. Jimmy spent most of his working life with the club, first as a player, then in the office. The Liverpool Supporters Club secretary, Mr. Arthur Mercer, said, "He was a great guy to us. He must have been working under a terrific pressure during those last few months." Another league championship followed in 65-66 as Liverpool finished 6 points clear of Leeds, and Ian chipped in with 10 goals in 40 games. Liverpool also reached their first European final as Borussia Dortmund beat them 2-1 in the 1966 European Cup Winners' Cup final at Hampden Park. Like the vast majority of Bill Shankly's first great team, St John was at its peak during the mid-1960s and continued to play regularly in the later 60s, mainly playing in a deeper position where he became a goal maker instead of a goal scorer. As he entered his 30s, his form and fitness began to dip, and he was eventually dropped by Bill Shankly, as I will explain later in more detail. He was a reserve team player in 70-71 and left Liverpool on August 25th, 1971, after playing 425 games and scoring 118 goals. I never imagined the situation that unfolded in the pre-match lobby at Newcastle United in the autumn of 1969, although I always knew I would have to play out a scene one day. I had gone to pass tickets to friends, and in the lobby was Jackie Milburn, the great legend of the North East, who was now a journalist and had been handed copies of the team sheets by a club official as we amiably shared the latest gossip. As Milburn ran his eyes down the team, I said I had to get back to the dressing room to change, but Jackie looked up sharply and said a few words that might have been for the impact they had, imprinted on my brain with a branding iron. "Bonnie lad, you're not playing." Bill Shankly had dropped me without saying a word, without looking me in the eyes, and Jackie Milburn couldn't keep the shock off his face. I was terribly disappointed, and when I got to the dressing room, my boots had been placed beneath the number 12 spade, and Shankly was missing. So I ranted and raved at Bob Paisley and Reuben Bennett, who tried to calm me down, but it was futile. I didn't warm up for the game, sat on the bench, head down, in a sour mood. We lost the game, and I travelled home on the team bus without saying a word, but on Monday morning I went straight into his office. "Why didn't you tell me I wasn't playing? After all these years, didn't you think I deserved something better than hearing it in the lobby of another football club?" Shankly said I should have been in the dressing room when he made his team announcement. He wasn't sympathetic as the conversation slipped into a full-blown row with yelling and cursing. The first training session at Melwood, I was told to join the reserves. It was embarrassing, but later, during my time as a manager, I came to realise how hard it had been the task facing Shankly, when, having led us to so many great moments, he had to discard us one by one. Shankly signed Tony Haley from Aston Villa and Alan Evans from Wolves. Emlyn Hughes was going to be the engine of the new team, and the new famous alliance was looming: Kevin Keegan and John Toshack. Billy Stevenson went to Stoke City, Jeff Strong to Coventry, Roger Hunt, who fell out of favour before St John, joined Peter Thompson at Bolton, and Gordon Mill went to Blackburn. At least 6 players went. Maybe the catalyst was the comments made by Malcolm Allison at Manchester City, who sneered publicly that the great Liverpool team had become a bunch of trial horses, living on yesterday's reputation rather than today's performance. Naturally, Shankly was enraged, pronouncing Allison a maniac, but the master of Anfield had always known that the time would come when he had to make changes to his team, and that to me makes him a great manager, as so few managers can produce a second-grade team, as Murphy and Busby did at Manchester United by producing 3, number 2 being the greatest. An FA Cup game against Swansea Town was Ian St John's final game for Liverpool, which he called his last hurrah, coming on as a substitute, scoring and wearing the number 12 on his shirt. Then on the Monday morning, Shanks called Ian into his office to tell him that George Easton wanted him in South Africa to play for Cape Town Hellenic. George Easton told Ian he would be on £100 a week, the same as Liverpool, and would be player coach, but with a beautiful house overlooking Sea Point, one of the most desirable areas in the city, better than living in Maghull. Liverpool Football Club's lack of appreciation for past service was in a different category, but that was the way it was in the game generally, as Ian received a 2-line note signed by the secretary saying he was being released. No appreciation. No, he had been paid his wages, received his bonuses, £1,000 for winning the title, the same amount for the FA Cup. The account was now closed. At Christmas time, the club gave the players turkeys. The birds were laid out on the table and the lads were told to collect them after training, with players who had families given the choice of bigger birds. Ian was still raw from the Newcastle experience when he went to collect his turkey. The man in charge of the birds was an assistant secretary, Bill Barlow, who disliked Ian, and the feeling was mutual. Bill Barlow was in the snooker room guarding the turkeys when Ian walked in, and he handed him a scraggy little bird, but Ian put down the turkey and asked if he was joking, and reached out for a bigger one. Barlow said, no, they are for the first team players. After 10 unbroken years, he was out of the first team for hardly a week, and the pleasure on Barlow's face was more than apparent. You bastard, Ian said, and had to fight hard to resist the temptation to flatten him. If you've got a problem with this, you better go and see the boss, Barlow smirked. Ian walked down the corridors of Anfield in some rage before knocking on Shankly's door. What do you want, son? Said Shanks. I just want to get my Christmas turkey, and some bastard gave me a budgerigar. It was not the exit Ian St John ever had in mind, and so sad. I bet we could look at the parting words of football players through history, but at least Ian's words to Shankly were humorous. Ian St John was selected to play for Scotland 21 times, making his debut in a 3-2 friendly win against West Germany at Hampden Park on May 6, 1959. But the first of his international goals came a year later, again at Hampden, but this time in a 3-2 defeat at the hands of Poland on May 4, 1960. Ian scored twice in a 1962 World Cup qualification playoff game against Czechoslovakia in November 61, but Scotland lost 4-2 after extra time and didn't qualify for the World Cup finals. In 25 years of running soccer schools, I cannot but notice the dwindling of natural talent. There are still diamonds to polish, but the circumstances surrounding such a prodigy have never been more hostile to the sure march to greatness. Bill Shankly came along to a session of my football school long after he detached himself from his Anfield fortress, and Ron Yates and myself were organising a session of penalty kicks. Shankly loved nothing more than taking a penalty. A 9-year-old was in goal as Shankly tore in and blasted home. If it had hit the ball on the head, it would have decapitated him, but Shankly glowed and said, "Don't worry, son, Ray Clements wouldn't have stopped that." By then, Bill Shankly was an old and rather saddened man, but something inside him still blazed, like Liverpool Football Club, and he and St John still felt the benefit. Ian returned to England from South Africa and joined Coventry City before joining his old friend Ron Yates, who was manager of Tranmere Rovers. After a short spell with Rovers, he retired from football in 1973 and managed both his former club, Motherwell, 73-74, finishing 9th in the league, and Portsmouth from 74 to 77. He later served as assistant manager at Sheffield Wednesday and Coventry City, and in 1979 he became a football pundit, but not always greasy. After leaving Sheffield Wednesday, where he was assistant manager in 79, Ian became a football pundit, striking up a successful TV partnership with Jimmy Greaves, and their Saint and Greavesy programme ran from 1985 until 1992, 7 glorious years. The photo shows the pair at the Colosseum in Rome, preparing for the 1990 World Cup. St John seemed to laugh continuously for 7 years, with Jimmy providing the gags. I cannot apologise for my dismay at the forces of greed that are so rampant in football today, or for my fears at the influence of such avarice and the urge to cheat at every level is eating away at the foundations of the world's most popular game. And this reminds me of a story Greavesy told me about his brilliant teammate Cliff Jones, whose value today would be astronomical. That was the opinion of Ian St John. Jones came home from a tour of South America with Wales, with Garrincha and Hento proclaiming him the best winger in the world, but Cliff was earning less than Greaves, Mackay and Blanchard. In the pub just round the corner from White Hart Lane, the trio egged him on by saying, "Go in there and tell the manager how you feel. You're the best in the world, so be a man, demand your rights." They rehearsed Cliff by taking up the arguments that Bill Nicholson would adopt, and finally Cliff agreed that it was the moment to act, so he went into Nicholson's office. Nicholson looked up from his desk and said, "Yes," and Cliff replied, "I should be on the same wages as the rest of the top players at the club, because I'm the best winger in the world." "That's your opinion," said Bill Nicholson. "Shut the door on your way out." 4 Liverpool legends. In the 2006 poll, 100 players who shook the cop, over 100,000 fans voted for their own favourite players. Photograph shows top goal scorers for Liverpool: Albert Stubbins, who was 50th, Ian Rush was third, Billy Liddell sixth, and Ian St John 21st. I read in January 2024 that Mo Salah was the greatest Liverpool player ever. Is it me or just other people who are blind to the history of a club? Shankly would turn in his grave. In June 2014, Ian announced that he had undergone surgery for bladder cancer in April, where the surgeons removed his bladder and prostate gland. He died on March 1st, 2021 at Arrow Park Hospital after a long illness, aged 82. Liverpool ran a fan poll of their favourite Liverpool players. 100 players who shook the cup. St John finished 21st in 2006. Ian St John was given one final Anfield farewell as the coffin of a Liverpool legend made an emotional stop at the statue of his former manager, Bill Shankly, outside the Kop end of the historic stadium. On hearing the news, Jimmy Greaves broke down in tears and said, "Ian St John and I had great fun working on the St and Greasy show. He was a lovely man and will be sadly missed by many, many people, and we must also remember he was a great footballer for Bill Shankly's Liverpool and beyond."